I'm Kimberly Atkins Storr. You may know me from MSNBC or the Boston Globe or hashtag Sisters-in-Law. But today, I want to talk to you about my new podcast called Justice by Design. I call it that because justice doesn't just happen on its own. It comes through the hard work and innovation of people who find on the ground real solutions to the issues that are most pressing in our society. Things from access to reproductive health care, or finding solutions to the climate crisis, or making sure everyone can get to the polls and have their vote be counted. And the people who are finding those solutions are who I want to bring to the table and talk to you about how we can build a better society stitch by stitch. So I hope you join me wherever you get your pods starting August 2nd for Justice by Design. Now, Snickers is Snickers. I need you to pick a spot and stay in it, okay, sweetie? All right.
Hello, and welcome to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. This week, our guest is Olympic gold medalist, former world record holder in the 400 meters, and chairman of the International Laureate Sport for Good Foundation, Edwin Moses, one of the greatest of all times. Remember, we love taking your questions, so write into politicswarroom@gmail.com or send a tweet to @Politicon for next week's show. Now, we're going to get to as many as we can, but don't forget to tell us where you're from. Before we get started, we have exciting news. James and I are taking Politics War Room to the 92nd Street Y in New York City on September 19th. You can get your tickets at politicon.com/tour. We can't wait to see you there. Tell your friends about us and remind them to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And please check out the links to our sponsors, 3-Day Blinds and Z-Biotics, and our episode show notes. We thank you for supporting our sponsors because it really helps make this podcast happen. The Kamala Harris-Tim Walz Democratic team is rolling out on a high this week, James, starting in Philadelphia. Now, my first choice for her running mate was Josh Shapiro, not just Pennsylvania, but he's a terrific communicator, political skills, and a good attack dog. We saw that in the Philadelphia stage before Harris came out. However, I think Tim Walz was a good choice. He wowed them in the Philadelphia announcement. He's a genuine rural Midwesterner, 24-year Army veteran, teacher, football coach, 6-term congressman, from a really quite a red district in the beginning. He's going to be attacked falsely as a radical left-winger. And while the Democrats left are claiming they vetoed Shapiro, Walz, he doesn't look like a lefty. He doesn't talk like a lefty. He didn't vote like a lefty. Maybe he's just not a lefty. Once again, the supposedly crack Trump team seemed off balance. They were expecting Shapiro, the candidate the Republicans did fear the most. But I'd give that team at least an A- this week. And I watched reactions on Fox News from Laura Ingraham and Jesse, I guess it's Walters, and they were painting Tim Walz as to the left of Bernie Sanders. They were really apoplectic. They were unnerved. They even brought on Kevin McCarthy, who will say whatever you want him to say. So I think they did pretty well, James.
Yeah, I think he did very well. And, but let's everybody, I don't want to be the skunk at the garden party, and this is a high, and I don't think it's a sugar high, okay? That's not what I'm suggesting at all. But they're going to get their sea legs back. And we're going to find out something that I've always contended, that the problem with the left is not so much their positions, although some of them are just impractical, but that's okay. People can dream, can have vision. A lot of it is their attitude, their language, their sense of sort of cultural superiority to other people. And Governor Walz doesn't exude any of that. He's an everyday kind of guy. And from everything that I know about him, what I really like about him, he is a clever and sly politician. He can come in and literally slit an opponent's throat. No, God damn it, I don't mean slit it with a knife. I mean slit it with words. And then go out. He's kind of like a commando candidate, if you will. And this is going to test a lot of theories that some people say that, that it's all unpopular stuff and everybody hates them. And then there's some people that say what's really unpopular is our presentation and our attitude. And this is a great test of that.
Well, I'm going to let you comment on some of that in just a minute, or ask you to. Let me share my personal experiences. They're rather limited. I interviewed him a couple times when he was a member of the House. He was one of the more moderate House Democrats, probably in the top, 15 or 20%. He represented a rural district, but I also covered his 2018 gubernatorial campaign. I went out there. He was defeated in the DFL had a caucus, and it just attracted the left. He was beaten by a left winger. He had to run against someone in the primary and defeat them, which he did. So rather than the radical left winger, he was the mainstream moderate candidate. I happened to have lunch out there with Fritz Mondale, who really just raved about Tim Walz as just a marvelous, common sense, progressive Democrat, which I think he is. One irony in Congress, he was one of only 17 Democrats at one point who voted to hold Attorney General Eric Holder in contempt. Holder's law firm did the initial vetting on the candidates, so I'm glad they didn't hold. I'm glad they were fair about it. And one more thing, and I'll turn to you. Shout out to Josh Shapiro, who gave a rousing endorsement less than 12 hours after he was notified he wasn't chosen. It was a good day.
Yeah, the other thing is one of the great backstabbers in modern Democratic politics is John Fetterman, but I'm going to wait till after the election to deal with him. But he's somebody that must be dealt with, and must be dealt with in real terms.
He sandbagged Shapiro.
He certainly did. And of course, the reason he's in the United States Senate is because of Shapiro. If you look at the Pennsylvania election returns 2022, and you'll get the idea of how Josh dragged this guy across the finish line.
I mean, the left used to brag about how well Fetterman did in counties like Luzerne and Butler and Washington. Fetterman did better than some other Democrats. He ran well behind Shapiro. James, I want to try something. No one has better political instincts than you. Politico Playbook this morning had the attack lines the Republicans are planning against Walz. I want to throw them out and tell me how serious you think they are and how you would counter them. The first was that he has created a refuge for trans in the state of Minnesota, including, bathrooms and all that.
I think that issue is kind of losing its juice. And what's the refuge of trans? I mean, I know that Jesse Waters is big on tampons and boys' bathrooms. I don't think there's a lot of speed left on that pitch. I think it's one of these things that have come and gone. And I think they're going to try it, but for some reason, that doesn't bother me a great deal.
The second in this Politico Playbook was that he let undocumented immigrants get subsidized health care, and so he made the state a haven for undocumented immigrants.
Well, he's in Minnesota. There's something that people got to realize about Minnesota. It's a very Lutheran state, and Lutherans, unlike other Protestant movements, particularly evangelicals, actually read the Gospels and take them to heart. So you have an enormous Somali population of Somalis in Minnesota because they would go over there and literally get them and bring them back. Okay, they have an entire mentality that is different in other states. It's a kind of hard thing to explain. But he's going to have to answer that, but he can answer it very effectively. And he can answer it through the words of the New Testament and the responsibilities we have. But he's going to, unlike the trans stuff, he's going to have to deal with that. But he's a good enough politician, a sly enough guy. He could make somebody regret for bringing that up. And he can also say, I would love to talk about this with J.D. Vance. I'll be glad to put this issue front and center because he'll kick J.D. Vance's ass, and we know that.
The third charge was that he slow walked and he was sending in the National Guard and protection during the disruptions and demonstrations after the George Floyd murder.
Well, you know the facts of this. You relate to people with the charges and what the actual facts are.
The charge was that he didn't bring in any protections when there was, I guess, demonstrations, rioting going on and protests of what happened to George Floyd. And they say, well, he waited 3 days. No, he didn't. He really waited 2 days. But it wasn't clear from the beginning what you would do. And he did bring the guard in.
But Trump said he brought the guard in.
You mean, wait a minute, James. Trump said something that wasn't. Trump lied? Oh, my gosh.
So the immediate charge, when he's asked that question, to say, unsurprisingly, Donald Trump lied. He had nothing to do with it. And then he can go from there. And by the way, he was against defund the police. He campaigned against the defund, whatever side you were on in that idiotic defund the police, right? That the black community was totally against. The only people that voted for it were these goofy white liberals in St. Louis neighborhood or wherever they are. So I think that's another charge that he wants them to make. He's going to invite them to make that charge because they're going to do very poorly if he gets a chance to answer it.
I got a final one. I think you might like this one. Chris LaCivita, who is the campaign chairman of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. He was also one of the architects of the Swift boat smears against John Kerry 20 years ago. He has been going wild, apparently, charging that Walz bailed on his National Guard unit when it was going to be called up to Iraq back in 2005.
Well, how do you bail on a National Guard? You sign a contract and you serve so many years.
I believe he was in for 24.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't even know what he's talking about. When I was in the Marine Corps, fortunately, I didn't have to go to Vietnam, but I was called to go. And if you had less than 4 months, you could not. You had to sign up for another 2 years. And I said, "Well, fuck it, I ain't signing for 2 more years. I got the hell out of there." I don't think it made me bailed out. I signed a contract for a certain enlistment. When the enlistment was up, I left. So does everybody else. So I didn't even know what this asshole was talking about.
And as we said a minute ago, he was in the Guard for 24 years. I mean, this was not like a guy who went in there, to get out of being drafted or whatever have you back in the old days. I agree. But this guy is a smear artist, and I'm sure they'll try that.
Well, I'm working on lining up some retired, E9, 07 types, 08s, to anticipate this and to take Mr. LaCivita's head and kick it off. All right, that's what we got. That's the way to deal with this. And I just want to make one more point. People don't realize this. Being a member of National Guard, if you ask Army general, they'll tell you that's as honorable as being a ranger. That is honorable, difficult, and patriotic service. And they give up a lot. I mean, they got to go training every month. They got to take 2 weeks off in the summer. They don't get to go to, the Maine for the summer. They live. They're regular soldiers. They're trained like soldiers. It's honorable service. And I can't wait for Mr. LaCivita to walk into this windmill.
I think that Walz did an overseas assignment. I've just been reading about it. But anyway, James, that's I hope the Walz team is listening to you today because I think that's exactly the way to handle it. Anything else you want to add about this?
Well, the only thing that I would add is I have some very close friends in Minnesota, and There's a sign over the urinal in Minneapolis that says, "Please piss in urinal. Louisiana needs drinking water." But people think very highly of him as a person, and they think very highly of his political skills. So that gives me a lot of confidence going into this. And, but I just want to warn everybody, we're a little bit on a high now, and we got to batten down and wait for the bullshit, because if I had to write a play about this, it would be "The Bullshit Cometh."
Yeah, it is coming. You're right. There's every reason for them to be on a high now, but if the election were held today, Trump might well win. So for all the advances they made, they got to keep making them, and they got to stay cool. But it's been a wonderful 2 weeks for Harris, and it was a great start for Walz. Okay, we'll be revisiting this a lot.
Get your room right with 3-day blinds. I love this company, and I do, like, I go to a hotel or something, man, I want like almost blackout curtains. I believe in being awake during the day. I don't really take naps, and I believe in sleeping in a dark room, in particular in the summertime, a dark, cool room. But this stuff is invaluable. And man, if it helps you get another 40, 45 minutes of sleep at night, that's going to make all the difference in the world the way you feel the next day. And most people are like me. They like to sleep in the dark. And there's a reason that when you're in solitary or you're in some Russian prison, they shine a light in your face for 24 hours a day, because it screws you up. So you don't want to be in a Russian prison, and you want to sleep in a dark room. Get these things. It's well worth the money.
Yeah. For most of my life, blinds would always let in blinding light at the crack of dawn. And I, let them open. Getting out of bed to close, that's a real pain. You want to try to get that few extra minutes of sleep if you can. So you wonder, why aren't my blinds smart and automated? Luckily, we discovered there is a better way to buy blinds, shutters, shades, and drapery. It's called 3-Day Blinds. They are the leading manufacturers of custom window treatments in the United States, and right now they're running a buy one, get one 50% off deal. Now, we can shop for almost anything at home, so shop for blinds at home too. 3-Day Blinds, local, professionally trained design consultants average 10 plus years of experience in providing expert guidance on the right blinds for you, right in the comfort of your home. Just set up an appointment and you'll get a free, no obligation quote the same day. We love that the expert team at 3-Day Blinds handles all the heavy lifting. They design, measure, and install for you so you can sit back, relax, and leave it to the pros. Once you hear about them, it's time to upgrade. Their blinds come in tons of great styles, so it's an easy sell on the family. With 3-Day Blinds, we're excited to be getting better sleep and opening and closing blinds from the comfort of your beds. Alexa, I slept great. Now let there be light. We know you're going to like 3-Day Blinds as much as we do. So go ahead and pick from thousands of options made for any budget or style. Plus, after 45 years in business, they're the highest rated blinds company on Trustpilot. It's the perfect summer project, especially because they do all the work. Transform your home with 3-Day Blinds today. Now, right now, you can get 3-Day Blinds, buy one, get one 50% off deal on custom blinds, shades, shutters, and drapery for a free, no charge, no obligation consultation. Just head to 3dayblinds.com/war room. That's buy one, get one 50% off when you head to 3dayblinds.com/war room. One last time, that's the number 3, dayblinds.com/war room. Now, you also can find the link in our show notes. James, our guest is one of the great Olympians of all times. Dr. Edwin Moses, two-time Olympic gold medal winner in the 400-meter hurdles, won 170 consecutive hurdles races, one of the hardest 400-meter races, one of the hardest events in track, a celebrated athlete, a celebrated intellectual. Dr. Moses, in Paris, we are delighted you'll be joining us. First, what's your take on these Olympics?
Well, the city of Paris is the best tourist location in the world, number one. And just the backdrop, seeing all these original buildings and where the German and the French and the Americans, where they have their TV studio set up is really just spectacular. You couldn't expect more. Everyone's happy. The French are going crazy because they're having a really, really good Olympics. And the atmosphere is just electric. The city is very quiet. It's not as busy as it used to be, so you can get around by taxi or Uber, and cars are available. And except for the streets being packed, it's just a wonderful experience. Not to mention the gastronomical experiences that we have every day, because I've lived here in Paris before and loved the food, so I'm in heaven.
Oh, that's fabulous. How different are the games today than they were back in 1976, 1984, and 88?
In 1976, we were dealing with pure amateur athletes, and the Olympic Code did not allow us to legally accept shoe contracts, do commercials. We were pretty much on lockdown as athletes, forced to believe in the true Olympic ideal. And then in 1981, all that changed, and I was a part of getting the Track and Field Federation and the IOC to come together to allow us to be marketable and have contracts and do deals. And that was in the run up to the 1984 games. And the way that Peter Uberoth and the LA84 committee set everything up, the athletes, they were bringing athletes in to liaise and do deals with customers, with the consumers and the sponsors, and matching us up. And the Olympics has just taken off since then. They were almost broke in 1981 with a couple of $1 million in the bank, and now it's a multi-billion-dollar endeavor. But the athletes still don't make money. Some of the countries pay money, but the sacrifice to be an Olympic athlete is still basically the same. You do it at your own risk. You may not get a reward, but nonetheless, athletes from all over the world sign up and dedicate their lives to Olympism.
You know, I watch those games when we all celebrate the winners, but I think of those who finished fourth or fifth or seventh. They've trained for years for this. I mean, everything. And I just can imagine the incredible disappointment. But is there any, I'm sorry, go ahead, Dr. Moses.
I was talking to a gentleman from Sports Illustrated this morning about that very subject. And even at our Olympic trials, where we're like first three past the tape, I would rather be seventh than fourth. At least I know I got my butt kicked and I go back to the drawing board. But you're finishing fourth off of the bronze and off the podium, I mean, it's heartbreaking, and it really affects your life. So I'd rather be seventh than fourth, to be honest.
Is there any athlete or event that has really stood out for you in Paris?
I'm looking for the men's and women's 400-meter hurdles with Sydney McLaughlin and Femke both in the Netherlands. That's going to be the biggest one-on-one matchup in the Olympic Games. Everyone's just anticipating that. Sydney's broken the world record 4 times. Femke's running very, very well. She literally tracked down the whole pack and ended up finishing first in the mixed relay. I think a lot of people saw that, so she's in fantastic condition. Then the men's hurdles, you have Rai Benjamin, the American, Karsten Warholm from Norway, and Dos Santos from Brazil. All these guys are running low 46 times, and that's going to be another competitive race. So my race, after years of fighting to put the event on the main screen, now the men's and women's races are even bigger than the 100 meters. No one's thinking about the 100 anymore. Everyone's waiting for the 400-meter hurdles, men and women.
Well, I agree. The 400-meter hurdles is the best, but that 100 meters final was pretty darn good.
Yeah, it was close. I mean, it just goes to show you just the reaction time. I mean, one step, I think, had the Jamaican that finished second really pressed his race one step earlier, or knew that he was going to be chased down from behind, that could have changed the whole outcome.
let me ask you one more question, turn it over to James. You've been very involved in the anti-doping efforts over the years, and I'm sure progress has been made, but there's still complaints, this time about the Chinese swimmers. Could the IOC be doing more?
They absolutely could be doing more, along with the World Anti-Doping Agency. You know, Travis Tigert, who's the CEO of United States Anti-Doping Agency, of which I was a chairman for about 10 years. We do a lot of progressive work and innovative work, really try to cut to the chase. But United States Olympic Committee is the only Olympic committee that doesn't have a sports minister, with that it's not a function of the government. And because a lot of these governments sit around the table at the World Anti-Doping Agency, and the IOC sponsors it to 50%, you have a lot of politics going on. And what I'm seeing with the whole China scenario is very, very similar politically, which most people won't know, but it's very similar to what went on at the Sochi Olympics in 2014, when the Russians changed samples in the lab and got caught red-handed. And that case is still going on 10 years later. So we're very, very concerned about that in the United States and all over the world.
James.
So I suppose, of course, I'm giddy because I was a quarter mile in high school when I ran. It was segregation, so I actually got to come in second or third a couple of times. But I want to ask you, because you would have been a three-time Olympic champion, but for the 80, I was not participating in 80 games, so you should have been a three-time champion. But you literally have an engineering background, and you changed the way the race was run. There was like pre-Edwin Moses 400-meter hurdles, and there was post-Edwin. Tell our audience of listeners how you use your engineering background to change the way people run the 400-meter hurdles.
Well, when I first started the 400 hurdles, they just called it the bastard race, because you had guys who were probably mediocre in the 400 flat, probably mediocre in the 110 hurdles, just thrown into that event, and that was the scrum. And when I came in, I was a very good 400 flat runner and a very, very good high hurdler, and so I went in with an advantage of being top quality in both of those events, and not someone who couldn't score points or couldn't be competitive internationally. So my background in physics and engineering, I mean, I studied classical mechanics and orbital mechanics and everything having to do with energy and inertia and displacement and form. And I just loved the sport of track and field. And I just figured out really logically that there were a lot of ways to shave time off of the clock in the hurdles. One being in that there's 10 hurdles. There's really 31 possible mistakes to be made in the hurdles. Number one is at the start, and then there's 10 hurdles. There's a takeoff, flight through the air, and landing. So you have 31 mistakes that probably a lot of those are going to be made. And I just figured out ways to clean up the hurdles, number one, and become very efficient. So even if I was saving, say, 600ths of a second, 6,000ths of a second over 10 hurdles times 10, that's like 0.6 of a second. 0.6 of a second can be 5 or 6 meters. So I did those kind of calculations, cleaned up my form, was a good hurdler, and then used basic calculus to run in my lane with the proper leg, the shortest possible distance. They measured the race from 8 inches from the inside lane, and the lanes are 48 inches. So when you're running on the line versus on the outside of the line over 2 turns, you can be running 6 to 8 meters further, depending on the size of the track. So I cleaned that up. So I figure the efficiency time I got from going over the hurdles as efficiently as possible, plus 6 or 8 meters free that I didn't have to run, that other athletes would probably run. That gave me probably 15 or 20 feet free distance during the race. And so that's what I did from the beginning. And I trained myself harder and was in better conditions. So those 3 elements just put me way, way ahead of everyone else.
So that was, I'm thinking obviously a lot about this show and the impact the Olympics has had on Black Americans. And I want to go back to the moment in Mexico City in 1968, where Al Hunt actually gets the trivia question, who was the silver medalist in the 200?
I did.
It shocked me. But it was. Tell us about the impact that moment.
He was very supportive of Smith and Carlos, too.
Peter Norman was his name, Albert?
Yes,
something like that.
it was.
Right.
Yes.
And you know, Peter suffered the wrath of the Australian Olympic Committee until he died. He was persona non grata. Tommy Smith and John Carlos actually flew to Australia to carry his body to the grave because they felt so strongly about him. He was very much an ally in the social justice, the way that they treated the Aboriginal people in Australia. He was just very, very much ahead of his time. And he was vilified until he died. And Tommy and John actually went and carried him to his grave. They did.
What a story.
Yeah,
what
did.
I got. It just about. Did you ever meet Alberto Juantorino? You had to have met him at some point, don't you?
Many times.
I mean, the 400 and 800 same Olympics. I mean, I'm sorry. You got to take a real deep bow to that.
Yeah.
That's not easy.
Yeah.
So we'll talk a little bit about these Olympics. And I just love the Simone Biles quote. I love my black job. I think that's one of the 5 greatest quotes of all fucking time. I mean, you gotta love that, don't you?
My life. Engineering, track and field, Olympism. I was the only one of the few involved in the administration of track and field, and definitely the first involved in drug testing. So, I give myself credit now. I've never heard that term, but that would have been me.
So I will turn right back to Albert, of course, I have to ask you an LSU question because it's me and Mondo Duplantis, who is going to be one of the real stars. And he competed for Sweden because his mother was a Swedish Olympian.
Right.
But I didn't realize this. If you're an American track and field athlete, you have to have the coaching that's supplied to you by the Olympic Committee. And I think Sweden said his mom and dad could coach him.
Yes.
It's kind of a odd little trivia thing here, but that was exciting when he pole vaulted that 26 inches on the
His father was in my generation, Greg Duplantis. He competed when I was competing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I know his father quite well. I haven't seen him in years, but yeah, the kid, the father had the kid with a pole vault pit in the backyard from the time he was 6 years old. And so that's just his thing. That's what he does. And he's been groomed to be a world-class pole vaulter. And fortunately, in the pole vault, you can pick when you want to attempt a world record, unlike running events. So he's broken a record many, many times.
And he did it on the third jump, and he went back and hear his dad. He went right to his and he said, "Good fucking job." Go ahead, Albert. Thank you.
Yeah. But going back to your question about the Olympism and African-American athletes, in my film, Moses 13 Steps, Tommy Smith is in the film. And the film starts when I was a young kid, and Spike Lee, Sam Jackson, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Lonnie Bunch from the African-American Museum, we're all weighing in on what it was like during the 60s, watching, not even before the 68 Olympics, but watching the impact of Tommy Smith and John Carlos. We have footage in there depicting, live footage of blacks getting fire hose, chewed up by dogs, because my brother in the film said we were 12, 13 years old. And this is what we saw. And this is the trajectory that they put our lives on. And those were the days, when African-Americans, a lot of us couldn't get into a lot of the larger, predominantly white institutions. So everyone went to an HBCU. And we talk about that trajectory, Mexico City, lots of footage about that, the social justice impact. And Neil deGrasse Tyson and Sam, and we're all talking about what the effect had on us at that time and how that related to my story. So it's a very, very different type of documentary.
How do we watch it? Go ahead, Paul. Go ahead.
We're having a private showing here at the Olympic Village at Olympic House at 7:00 tonight. The film is out for distribution. Morgan Freeman and Revelations are handling that. So we're still in the hunt for distributors. We've only had 2 private screenings. The first one was at the LeBron James Uninterrupted Film Festival about 3 weeks ago. And so this is the second time that anyone outside of the the producers and private people have been able to see it. But it's going to be available on film. It's going to come out in Germany because it was a German production company that did it. I wanted to use an international company because it's an international story. It's not really an American story. It goes through the Cold War, what happened in Moscow in 1980, and just follows my trajectory. And then it starts talking about the running and the winning, in addition to all the other elements. So it's a very, very different take on a documentary, where it shows all the way from 8mm footage that my father took, who was a Tuskegee Airman in 1962,
Wow.
us playing in kids. And it's so great. I had the cans, but I never knew what was on them. I hadn't seen them in 60 years. Got it digitized, and it looks as though someone filmed it today and made it to look old after they colored.
Well, I can't wait. I mean, this is going to be, we will plug it as soon as it comes out, Dr. Moses. It's going to be such a thrill to see it. You know, I just thinking about Carlos and Tommy Smith, John Carlos and Tommy Smith. My wife is in a group that gave them a Courage Award a couple of years ago, where I was honored to meet them. They've had an extraordinary life since 1968. They are not people who just went back into the woodwork after their efforts to humiliate them. They really have are quite extraordinary citizens.
Yeah, and I met Tommy in 1976, the year that I went to the Olympic Games. He was coaching at Oberlin University, and I went to the Division III National Championships, and I met him, and my eyes literally popped out of my head. So I've known him since 76, 77, when I moved to California. And, you know, I've heard a lot of the stories that he's told and how vilified he was during that time. So I was able to, I really understand the story because I was there with him, and one of the few people that was really supported him as an athlete. A lot of even African-American athletes did not want to be close to him or be around him. For fear of being just association. So I was one.
Oh, he was vilified by. They both were vilified by people like Brent Musburger. It was just awful.
Yeah, I never knew that happened until a couple of years ago. But they're fantastic guys. John Carlos and Tommy both live in Atlanta. Tommy is heavily featured in the film with conversations and some of his Freedom of Information records that our research team found about him being surveilled. All these things are actually in the film because it was important to me, because that's what I saw. And Spike Lee said it succinctly in the film. After John Carlos, Tommy Smith won in Mexico City, kicked out, it was in October, we went back to school, and we went back to school, and Spike remembered, just like I did, that they played the national anthem over the loudspeakers. And he said that on that day, everybody raised their fist in the air. So we're when we have our premiere on September 21st and at the Morehouse Human Rights Film Festival, that's going to be the world premiere. Tommy will hopefully be there. He lives in town. And we're going to really show not just about track and field, not just about Edwin Moses running, but all the things that happened in the 60s, from the assassinations, the human rights, the civil rights. All of that is embedded in the film. So it's a really, really different take on an athlete's documentary. They get to the racing a third of the way through the film, and they even let Danny Harris, who beat me after 122 races, they let him tell the story through his lens and not me. So it's a very, very different type of documentary.
You were so gentle with me. You corrected me. I said 107. It was 122. I apologize. Let me get back to the chat for a second. One of the things you talked to James earlier about, the way you so carefully calibrated what you were going to do. The other thing you did is, as I recall, is you did, I think, before it had mainly been 15 steps before hurdles, and you went to 13 steps.
Yeah.
That made a big difference, I gather. Could some, great Edwin Moses of 2028 go to 12 steps?
They're actually doing 12. Some of the competitors.
Are they?
Yeah, they're doing 12. I was actually doing 12 back then, but I was 15 meters ahead of the competition. I experimented with 12 steps and was able to do it. But you have to have a really, really hard race with someone pressing you. Because essentially what happens is after the second hurdle, you're running full steam ahead by yourself. for 8 hurdles. And that just didn't make sense to me. I could run 12 steps. I was the first one to ever do it in a race, but now they're doing a combination of 13 and 12, and then they're moving to 14 or 15 at the end. But I was the first one to run 13 steps, and it was because of my training and the kind of preparation I did and the logic that I figured out to really make it work.
You know, when I thought of you when watching these Olympics, actually was watching Sydney McLaughlin. Just the ease with which she ran, and of course she lapped the field almost. I mean, it was just she's a remarkable hurdler, isn't she?
She really is. There's no one else like her. She's been groomed and seasoned since she was in high school. She's just a fantastic human being. She's very, very sweet. She ran at the Morehouse Edwin Moses Legends Meet, her first race of the season, back on May 31st. She's just the sweetest human being. But I tell you, one thing that I noticed when I first saw her in person at the World Championships in Eugene last year, she's got the killer look in her eye. When she's going to the track, I mean, her eyes will bore right through you. She's looking ahead, and she's very, very focused. And that reminded me of me. I was really that focused. And my competitors used to think that I was arrogant and didn't want to talk, but I was just that focused because I knew what the job was going to be. And I was running a second faster, was going to be a lot more tired, and had to perform at a higher level than everyone else. So she's got that. And she's going to have a good competitor in Femke Bol in the race. It's going to be a fantastic race, men and women's 400 hurdles. So, yeah, those two women, they're the best that there ever was over 400 meters, hurdles or no hurdles.
Wow. James.
So, first of all, before I go, I just want to tell you that time when that airplane in Delta Airlines, you came and said I'm Edwin Moses. Somebody could have been fucking Moses himself to me. I'm Moses. So, I'm trying to figure this out, but I'm too stupid too. When you're hurdling, what foot do you like to lead with? And if you do 12, that's going to affect what foot you lead with, or you do an odd number, doesn't it? Or what's the physics behind it? I'm trying to unpack it, but I can't get there.
When you go over the hurdle, that first foot that touches down, your touchdown leg, they don't count that. They count the following step.
Okay.
So, and you're right. If you take 12 steps, you're going to you're going to hit the hurdle with your left foot one time and then the right foot. So if you're going to run with the same leg, you have to run 13 or 15 or 17 or 21.
Right,
That's
okay.
an odd number. For me, the distance was just right for me to run 13. And because I run with my left leg first, I can run closer to the inside lane. By doing that, I'm running less distance than everyone else, assuming that they're running, 3.5 feet further.
Gotcha.
So when you add that radius to the radius of the whole radius of the turn, it comes out to about 4 to 5 meters average during the course of the race. They're going to run further than you. It can be as much as 4 meters per turn, which would be like 8 meters, which is a long way in the race. So that's how I came to the conclusion to run 13.
Well, I just cannot thank you enough. We've kept you long enough. And all the bits for this podcast has got to be one of the most insightful, informative programs we have ever had. And I'm both Al and I know I speak for Al when I say we're eternally grateful for you for taking time and pausing to do this, sir.
Thank you.
Stay on your game after a night of drinking with Z-Biotics. Well, I'm out here in the Shenandoah Valley, and sometimes it get a little away from me. Thank God it didn't last night, but it happens sometimes. And boy, you got to perform no matter what, no matter how late you stay up at night, no matter how far things get away from you. So any tool that you have that can deal with this is a good tool.
Z-Biotics pre-alcohol is the perfect way to make sure you perform your best after a long night out. It's a pioneering effort by PhD scientists to create the world's first genetically engineered probiotic to tackle rough mornings after drinking, so you can get back to business quickly. To fill you in, pre-alcohol is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. So pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make Z-Biotics your first drink of the night, then drink responsibly, and you're going to feel your best the next day. Thanks to Z-Biotics, James will even go on long runs after his long nights. And with that scorching weather in New Orleans, or actually in the Shenandoah, every time we have Z-Biotics pre-alcohol before a drink, it makes such a difference the next day. You know, even if you have drinks at a client dinner the night before, you can jump into action right after waking up. So join us in feeling ready to go with Z-Biotics, whether you're writing all day, heading out on a run, or even going in front of an audience. Z-Biotics is our MVP when it counts. So make sure it's in your lineup. Now, between vacations, weddings, birthdays, and reunions, maybe conventions, there's so much going on. Get the most out of your summer plans by stocking up on pre-alcohol now. Go to zbiotics.com/PWR to get 15% off your first order. When you use PWR at checkout, pre-alcohol is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money. No questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/PWR and use the code PWR at checkout for 15% off. Thank you, Z-Biotics, for sponsoring this episode and our good times. You can also find the link in our show notes. And now for the outrage of the week. Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch went after President Biden's proposed Supreme Court reforms, warning the president to, quote, be careful, end quote, declaring we need a, quote, independent judiciary, end quote. Yes, we do. Not one where all the Republicans on the high court, say a former Republican president, who happens to be a convicted felon in Manhattan, they say he's immune for his actions as president, even apparently if criminal. We also want a Supreme Court that maintains the same sort of high ethical standards that we expect of public officials. That would mean fully disclosing a major land deal with a law firm that has cases before the Supreme Court, and on your disclosure form, letting us know who bought that property, Justice Gorsuch. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz should have one response to Gorsuch's warning. Bring it on.
That guy, you know, he's lucky because of Clarence Thomas is just so sloppy and greedy and take anything. And you know, or Alito, who's just a massive asshole. But I got to say, he's right up there with him. He might, in terms of being shady, I think crooked. But when you're a judge and you sell a house overvalued to somebody who does business before you, I don't know how you can be a judge and be any more crooked than that. And what cracks me up about these people is they don't even realize how crooked they are. That guy doesn't realize what a massive jackass hypocrite he is. He just doesn't. The outrage, it's somewhat in terms of observation. Last night in the 1st Congressional District of Missouri, a primary election was held, and Cori Bush, who was the squadette or squad member or whatever you call it, got beat by Wesley Bell, a prosecutor in a Democratic primary. And, of course, Jamal Bowen, the same thing happened. And the more these people run for office and lose, the more they run their mouths. Can somebody, like, gently tell them that you're not popular, that you're not very well liked? And why don't you just settle down, calm down, and you know, let's get Vice President Harris and Governor Walz in office, and let's go put our shoulder to the wheel. But, you know, when you vote against the infrastructure bill in a city like St. Louis that has a deteriorating infrastructure, to say the least, or you vote against Build Back Better because it doesn't meet your standard of perfection, you deserve to get beat. And you got beat, and it's a good thing.
Hey, James, now for the questions from our listeners that are always so good. It makes me feel good about how smart they are and how attentive they are and how they keep us on our toes. Richard in Studio City wants to know, what, if anything, are the Democrats doing to counteract and overtly attack the GOP's extensive voter suppression of likely Democratic voters? And that goes with Luke in Fall River, California, who says, what if Kamala wins and Republicans pull some BS and get it sent to the House? Are Democrats ready for this kind of
Actually, I'm going to throw it back to you because you know more about this than I do. So if you could take them in order and answer them, I think that would be very helpful.
It is so rare that I know more about a subject than James, but I will take this opportunity. Look, I think they are prepared for it. I think the effort on the Republicans, the one thing they're going to do differently than last time, they're going to try to do it pre-election, not just post-election. I think the Democrats are prepared for that. Their chief lawyer last time was my friend Seth Waxman, former Solicitor General, worked with the late, great Walter Dellinger, and also works with Don Verrilli, another former solicitor. They're clearly prepared for that. And I hope and think they're prepared for what happens ahead of time, because that's exactly what there are a bunch of Republicans who probably think we can't win this thing legitimately, so here's how we're going to win.
Absolutely. That just reminds me of how much we miss Walter every day. I know it's been a while since he's been gone, but boy, God, I'd give anything in the world if he just could do one more interview with him.
Oh, right. And, he was, I know that Seth and Don and whoever else they are enlisting will miss Walter, but, the Democrats have had some election lawyers that I'm not crazy about, but I'll tell you, Seth Waxman and Don Verrilli are as good as it gets. James, our next question is from Russ in Plainfield, New Jersey. Russ asked, with the Harris campaign starting 3 months before the presidential election, do you think maybe future American elections will be more like those in Europe, starting only months before? No, Russ, I'm afraid it won't be. This was a very unusual circumstance. I frankly think it probably benefits Kamala Harris. All right, now we'll see, but I think this is unique.
Because we have a First Amendment.
What do you think?
Okay, if they don't, I mean, it's different, but they have passed a law, the perfect right to do it, that a campaign can last like six weeks or something like that. They suspend Parliament, and you run. I understand, I get this question a lot, but it's constitutionally impermissible to limit the amount of time somebody can campaign in the United States, and I don't think that's going to change.
No, I don't either, and you're right. But I mean, you could schedule primaries and caucuses 4 or 5 months later than you have them now.
The Missouri primary was last night. I think Florida has traditionally had theirs very late. I actually kind of like that maybe a little bit better. Normally, as I recall, a lot of these things in May for whatever reason, or June, but you have perfect right to schedule your primary whenever you want it, and maybe the closer the better. I'm totally open to
that. Kyle in Jefferson City, Missouri, asked, and James, this is to you. I know. Could you expand on what makes a well-run Democratic state party? Kyle says we mentioned Virginia and Michigan. I think we mentioned Virginia and Wisconsin, but the point's the same. So, James, tell us what makes a well-run Democratic state party.
There are a number of things. Some of it is administrative because the state party is constant. So you have governor's races, legislative races, local elections, secretary of state. Some of them are very good at maintaining and keeping a voter file that they're able to turn over to campaign. They have lists of people over a period of time, they accumulate lists of volunteers and stuff like that. If they're really good, like the parties I talk about are really good, they get called to comment on from time to time. Some of them, like Wisconsin, can be very effective and very clever in their comeback. Maybe the biggest thing they can do is if they accumulate resources, and financial resources for sure, they can encourage good candidates to run, and they can discourage bad candidates from not running. And the more resources that the state party accumulates, and the more professional they are, the more input they'll have on, which I always think is the single most important thing in politics, recruiting good candidates to run and discouraging bad candidates from running. That goes to the DCCC, to the DSCC, to anything else. Candidate recruitment is a key element in political success. And the Republicans keep fucking it up. They just do. And what they fall for every time, they got this guy in Wisconsin that the ads that they're running against him are just devastating. That he's running for the United States Senate, Wisconsin, made all his money in Orange County, California. Tammy Baldwin, the best line, I think. Well, we got a green county and a brown county in Wisconsin. We don't have an orange county. Said farmers don't work hard. How could you run somebody for the Senate in the state of Wisconsin saying that farmers don't work hard? That's not. You need to do better. But I am a big believer in recruitment.
I want to tell this guy in Wisconsin or counsel him, just spend one hot afternoon out there baling hay for 7 or 8 hours, and then just tell me how hard that is. That's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
You got to milk cows on Christmas Day. Ever get a day off. But anyway, that recruitment is huge. Richard,
and I hope I get this right because I love the country, and Pattaya, Thailand, or maybe it's Pattaya. Anyways, Pattaya, Thailand. Thailand is such a fun country. Political problems, but a fun country nevertheless. He has a good question. He said, what's being done to tap into all the registered voters who have retired overseas and who may not be aware of how important this presidential election has become? That would be a very important assignment for the DNC. You can track down a lot of these people. And look, they're not many, Richard, in all honesty. But in a close election, who knows?
Yeah, I think you get have delegates. Democrats abroad get some delegates to the convention. But look, in London, comes to mind, Bridge, we do fundraisers in London. We'll get 15, 20 people will show up at a luncheon. So you can and most of America, just going to shock you, that live abroad are pretty affluent. And, they might be working for a bank, they might be, whatever it is, that decision people make. And I think they keep a pretty, a decent tab on them. And, some of them are able to vote in different states, have different registration things. But believe you me, they keep good tabs on the ones that have financial resources. And like I said, they have some say in the convention. So it's, and maybe we could do better, but somebody take it to heart. But I take your question to heart.
Well, it's good to hear we have listeners in Thailand.
And Thailand is great. I went to Phuket, and I've been to Bangkok, and that's a cool place. Yeah, they got government problems. I think they got a king, if I remember right. It's kind of popular.
Well, they got a military, sometimes stages cruiser. My cousin's got a wonderful villa in Phuket, and there is no more charming place. God, it's wonderful. Christine in Brooklyn, New York asks, weird versus juvenile. Which is the better word for MAGA?
I did a Politicon video on this, and I think the reason that, and of course Tim Walz uses the word weird to describe, weird is not necessarily a value word. You can be weird and be kind of cool, like keep Austin weird, keep Portland weird. If somebody says, hey, Carville, you're kind of a weird guy, I don't take offense at that. It's a word that I'm settled on, but I'm certainly open, and I'm open to having a discussion about this, is creepy. I think creepy, that there's not a positive connotation to the word creepy. And what I like about it is you can fulfill your own definition. But this is a very good question. And the words that we're going to use to describe these people are going to be, while we're on this question, I just want to take this opportunity to talk to you about this. Is Trump deteriorating? All right, he's always been so bad that, and said so many crazy things, you just become shock immune. But his whole rant about Biden is coming back and they're going to dump Paris at the convention, I think that represents a deterioration, even beyond shocks and being electrocuted or any of that kind of crazy crap. Do you think he's like taking it a notch further down? Is he's still not finding the bottom of the Atchafalaya River? Is he still searching for the bottom?
He is, but he's getting there. He made a lot of progress for the bottom. James, I agree with you, but whatever word you use, you ought to direct it at Trump, Vance, and the people around them, not at all the voters. You don't want to fall into the Hillary Clinton trap when she called them all deplorables, because there's a small segment of that people who are sort of leaning Trump who can be persuaded, and so I think you have to be careful there. I am going to do something. I'm going to steal a question from New Orleans, James. Dave is asking, would it be politically possible for Vice President Harris to make a distinction between supporting Israel 110%, but not Bibi Netanyahu? Absolutely. That was Josh Shapiro's position. He called Bibi Netanyahu one of the worst world leaders ever. Our friend Jim Gerstein has done surveys of Jewish Americans. They are very pro-Israel, and they are really anti-Bibi Netanyahu. So I think it's absolutely not only possible, but desirable to make that distinction.
It was a time, I mean, probably some sort still so, but some people, it's eminently possible to be pro-Israel and anti-government of Israel. In fact, there's a lot of people that are very pro-Israel, that live in Israel, that are anti-government to Israel. That's the most Israeli thing you can do, is be anti-government. So, of course, it's not only is it possible, I think it signals that you care much more about the Israeli nation than some reflexive Likudnik that actually thinks that this negligent criminal is good for the Israeli country. And I agree with Josh. I agree with Harris. She didn't go when he spoke to the Congress. Why would you show up for a negligent criminal? I have no idea. So I wholeheartedly concur, and I wholeheartedly fundamentally believe you can be very pro-Israel and very anti-government of Israel.
Mm-hmm. James, our final question is two. One is Heather in the Bay Area of California, who says, are national and state Democrats ready for the street fight we're going to have? And Carla, similarly in Washington, D.C., asks, when should we expect the Kamala Oppo research to drop, and what should we expect?
Well, I hope we are, but somehow or another, we tend not to be. I will say this, and this bears repeating, we haven't lost an election in 2 years, all right? And there's all of these kind of asswipes that say this is what the Democratic Party did. Brett Stevens, Tyler Cowen, Ross Duhart, always philosophized about how to fix the Democratic Party. Well, I got news for y'all. Why don't you talk about fixing the fucking Republican Party that can't win an election? Because the actually Democratic Party is doing pretty good. I mean, but you got to be ready for what's coming. You got to have not just answers, but pushback. That's very, very critical. And we're going to see. But it's a legitimate fear for Democrats to have. And if we haven't learned anything, we have to learn. Don't fuck with these people. Punch them right in the mouth. People don't like get hit in the mouth. I'm a big believer in mouth punching in politics. And so hopefully, to be determined, but hopefully, we're ready for this. I hope.
James, I want to add one thing to it. They being the Harris team, brought in a bunch of new people, veterans. Some of them, like David Plouffe, quite good. I think they need someone like Mitch Landrieu as their chief spokesman. They don't have anybody who can really take on some of this stuff as well as he could. There's a role to play in that. I mean, a really important role. And I think, I don't know anybody who'd be better. Maybe there is, but they need someone like that.
I think we'll see Mitch tonight because he's speaking to the Shenandoah County Democrats. And we so appreciate him coming out here to Shenandoah. But I think...
I remember one other time he was out at the Shenandoah, James Carville. Seems to me...
And they're here, so
right.
they're definitely they're going too. And I agree totally. As much as I love Shenandoah County and I love the Shenandoah County Democrats, all 25 of them, they could be putting him to really good use. And but you never know. I have my own suspicions internally, but I'll keep my own suspicions to me. But go back to the staffing issue. And I've always believed this: if you have three people and each one has an IQ of 150, you don't end up with an IQ of 450. You end up with an IQ of 50. But if you have one person in charge that has an IQ of 130, then 130 is a lot higher than 50. And I've never, ever been a believer in inclusive outreach campaign leadership. I think if you want to have a big D Democratic government, you can't have a small d Democratic campaign. And I believe that. I don't think I'm ever going to change my mind on this subject. And when I hear people talk about the need for inclusion and hear all voices and everything, I go like, oh, God, get this person away from me. But always been an issue, particularly an issue with Democrats.
Every good winning Democratic campaign that I've ever covered, and being my age, I go back a long ways, has always had someone who's in charge. A lot of other people, but someone's in charge. And if it's done by committee, it usually, particularly if there's a crisis, which there will be,
right,
it doesn't
Absolutely.
work out.
You and you've covered more campaigns than most anybody. I've been in more campaigns than most anybody. Between the two of us, we disagree on some things, but we do have some collective wisdom. And I think we're both very comfortable with this piece of advice. Empower somebody, and understand this. To empower somebody is to disempower someone else. There's no other way to do it. And somebody's going to get their feelings hurt. But you know what really hurts your feelings? When you fucking lose. That really hurts your feelings.
Yeah. The sole objective of this campaign ought to be to get 270 or more electoral votes on November 5th. That's what it's all about. Anyway, we'll be back with a lot more. This is James. I just would say in closing, I as you say, I've done this for a long time. If you just think about the last month, the last 3.5 weeks, I don't know in American politics we've ever seen anything quite like
we haven't. Let me be very clear and very definitive. No, we have not seen anything like this. And I got this weird feeling it's not going to stop.
Yeah, static analysis usually doesn't work in politics. And it's going to be something we haven't anticipated in the next, 3.5 weeks.
Before I leave, just let me give another shout out to Dr. Moses. I couldn't have been a better guest, more insightful, more thoughtful, more relevant. Anything that you want to score, if you would like scoring a gymnastics, on insightful relevance, athletic legend ever, he's a perfect 10. I got to say that right now.
Oh, so true. And I love his stories about John Smith and John Carlos and Tommy Smith.
And Peter Norman. Great stories.
Right. Okay, we'll be back next week. Hey, thanks for listening to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. Remember, get your tickets for when James and I take Politics War Room live to the 92nd Street Y in New York City on September 19th. You can get tickets at politicon.com/tour, and we can't wait to see you there. As always, send your questions for us by email to politicswarroom@gmail.com or tweet them for next week's show at Politicon. Following this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you check out the links to our sponsors, 3-Day Blinds and Z-Biotics, in our episode show notes. We thank you for supporting them because when you do, it helps make this podcast happen. Now, to keep up with us, subscribe to Politics War Room on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And check out our Substack at politicswarroom.com. James and I are constantly adding new content, so go take a look. You can also find other shows you might enjoy on the Politicon YouTube channel or when you search Politicon on your favorite podcast sites. And remember, please rate the show with a 5-star review. We'll be back next week with another show as we continue our War Room planning.